Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Adjustments meeting for June 14th, 2021. If the Secretary would take roll of the members present. We have the agenda before us, and the first item here is to approve the minutes of the May 10th meeting. You've had a chance to look at these. Is there a motion to accept the minutes of last month?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion. Second. Okay, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried to accept minutes. This morning on our regular agenda, we have several items. The first item is to consider a variance request to exceed the maximum square footage of an accessory structure on an R1 zoned lot by 4,634 square feet. This lot is located at 2400 State Avenue West. Is there anyone here to speak for that? Anyone here to speak against that? Leonard, would you like to give us a little information about this before we go any further?
If you want to table this, if the applicant may or may not show up, and then we can come back to it, or did you want to move forward with it right away? Since no one's here to speak.
Okay, let's table that since we have a few more items here. That would be item number 1 and item number 2 are the same address. Okay. We will table that at this time until we get through with the rest of the items and then come back to that. Item number 3 is to consider a variance request to reduce the required 300-foot setback from a well to a 130-foot setback for a retail-based occupation. Location is at Lot 13 and west 75 feet of Lot Block 34, State Edition. Is there anyone here to speak for that?
Good morning. Tyler Oliver. Colby Capital is our company name. I live in Kansas City. We develop stores for Dollar General, and with your approval today, we plan to develop a Dollar General on this property. And it's our understanding that the well adjacent to us to the west, 133 feet away, is a capped and plugged well. It's going to be abandoned, and so therefore, non-operable, and we're building a commercial building. There's obviously no residence, no living quarters, anything like that. Would happy to answer any questions you guys might have about the project. Here today to just ask for that variance.
Is there anyone of the members here that has any questions?
And I believe the ordinance states it's a well. It doesn't separate out whether it's operating, non-operating, and so that's kind of why we're here today, since this has been plugged and capped and abandoned, And
it is, you say it is plugged?
It is, correct. And I can show you the, on the website to where it is and all the reference number and all that kind of stuff, but it is, plugged and capped and abandoned.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I had a question maybe for Mr. Schwint. This is very similar to what we just had a month or so ago northeast of town, right?
I believe it is. I wasn't at that meeting, but I did watch the recording of the meeting, so yes.
And I think at that time, there was some discussion about maybe going and looking at the wording of our ordinance, because it was the same language question, I think, on that issue. Is the city reviewing that at all?
Well, planning staff have been directed to look at that and the wording of this. The difference from the wells is the other well was never produced. Not sure what the history of this well is.
But it was drilled, right?
It was drilled.
Board, Scott Karski, I'm the current property owner of that lot. That well did produce at one time. It has been abandoned for nearly 3 or 4 years. It was taken over by the state. Last year, they issued like $33 million to plug and cap wells that were abandoned. And this was one of the wells that was approved for that. So last October and November, it was capped, plugged and abandoned. They're in the reclamation process. The company cannot come back. Scout Energy was the owner of that. They cannot come back and redo that well. It is taken over by the state completely. So that one is capped. The other well over there is long from that. It's closer to Stevenson Funeral Home. It is nowhere in that 300-foot range.
Are there any pipe or anything that were left in the ground that would cross your property?
They do leave the pipe in the ground, yes.
Does that cross?
But they have
your
to
property?
flush that. That has to be flushed and everything else.
Does it cross your property?
Yes.
Okay.
Flushed and left with water in it is it. But they can take, when the new company comes in to develop, they can leave it there and develop over it, or they can just take it out on their own.
Okay.
And I'm on planning and zoning also, and this will be brought up at the next planning and zoning meeting. Our ordinance was a little bit faulty in the fact that it does not address abandoned wells. The intent of the ordinance, it looks like, was just for current producing wells, and that makes sense to have something not within 300 feet. But an abandoned well is just like reclaimed property.
Okay. Any other questions for the gentleman? Yes. Yes.
I actually have a question. Do you know of any other ones we have close to it?
As far as abandoned wells, I do not. Producing wells up on the north side of town went through this type of, we actually, I think years back, it was 500 feet. It went down to 300. It was 300. There was a change as far as we went up to 300 feet, I believe.
Okay. That being said, what are your wishes as far as granting or not?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yeah.
move to approve the variance finding that the requirements of section 391211 have been met by the applicant for a variance.
Okay. There a second to that? There is a second to the motion. Those signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion approved. Request is granted. Item number 4, to consider a variance request to enlarge a signage square footage of a non-conforming sign per section 39-10-110C. B, located at 45 15th Street, 456, I'm sorry, at 15th Street West. Is there anyone to speak for that here?
Corey Branson owned the Men's Den Salon there. We're rebuilding the old Papa Murphy's we're looking at the old Bonanza sign. When we get finished with the building, I'd like to add 2 more signs below that for future tenants in that, what we're building there. The ones we want to add are 5.5 foot by 10 foot, smaller than the one that's up there now, but there'll be 2 smaller ones below it for each of the additional tenants that rent from there. So the sign's non-conforming for height reasons and setback, which we got a variance for the setback already before, and now we'd just like to add to that sign in the future.
So the sign is going to be the same size as what was up there?
No, it'll be smaller. The one that's up there is 8 foot by 18, 8 foot wide, 18 foot long. The additional signs will be 5.5 foot by 10 foot long. They'll be smaller.
And then additional signs below that?
Just those 2. There'll be 2 additional signs below what is now, you know, the Bonanza sign. I'm sure everybody's familiar with, but they won't be as large as that one.
Okay. Is there anyone in opposition to this sign present? Any questions, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I have one maybe for the city.
Okay.
This is a request because of increased square footage of the sign, right?
Correct.
Does the city, like with a strip mall or something, have a policy on putting a number of signs together instead of separate signs? I'm trying to think of like a T-Rex mall, because we wouldn't want everything in there to have an individual sign where you might put one sign and then list the businesses underneath it.
The city does have a sign ordinance that does address a mall setting. You can have your pole sign, and then you can have individual signs, but they're limited to the square footage of the individual space. I believe that is 20 square feet if you have multiple tenants, or the max of 200 square feet. If one business would take 50, obviously the rest would divide that out in that 200. On what we have here is we have a non-conforming sign of record. So this sign projects into the right-of-way a bit, and then the height. It's an existing sign, and you cannot increase the non-conformity. That's what the variance request is. Is generally what our code says is you cannot increase the non-conformity. There's a request to exceed the maximum square footage of the non-conforming sign.
Okay, so he could continue with the non-conforming sign, right?
Correct.
Okay. And what was his allowed square footage? And how much is he over? Maybe it's in here and I missed it again, but.
I do not believe we actually looked at the square footage as far as going over. What he has right now is allowed. Increasing the non-conforming sign is what we're at. I don't know if the applicant, if you supplied a square footage of another box, he actually wanted to add another box like is on the existing sign.
It looks like 5.5 by 10 additional square foot, but my question is, if this was a conforming sign, how is the size, would it be okay if it was a conforming sign?
The overall square footage, I'd ask the applicant, what's the overall square footage of the current sign?
144 square footage is the current sign at 18 by 8.
So
And you're
based
asking
on
for
up
another
to 200
50
square feet,
sticks.
yeah. Yes.
So this would be 200, so we would be,
It'd be 199 square footage would be the total square footage with the additional signs.
And
if
another,
it wasn't a non-conforming sign existing, this would be
Allowed,
okay?
yeah.
It'd be allowed based on that.
and another factor to consider also is the code reads that you get 1 lineal foot of sign per the lineal foot of your structure. So that's another factor that we use. And the idea on this site will be additional buildings. They're not there now, but that was actually also a consideration. And these additional boxes would be for the addition.
Right, yeah.
For the addition that
Multiple
you're doing
buildings.
right now, or for?
Actually, the future.
But the buildings that we looked at and approved at the last meeting,
Those will be
right?
built next year. The one that's getting built now is just the salon, and then there'll be 2 additional buildings that we had. The last meeting was for the setback for.
Was that the overall footprint, though? It
Yeah,
had a
that's the
future-
overall footprint, correct, yeah.
Okay. And that would be included with this
Correct.
signing? You wouldn't be coming back for additional signing?
No, that's what this is for.
Okay.
Any other comments, Leonard, from the city?
No other comments from the city.
Okay.
We had some inquiries to what the variance was for, but I did not receive any comments for or against.
What are the wishes of the board?
I have one more question.
Okay.
If we would approve, or if we would approve this variance, do we have to, or can we put something in there stating that, to the size shown on this? Because the request is to enlarge the non-conforming sign, but there's not like a footage on there. And with the way shown, it would meet like the 200 square foot the city normally recommends. But if we just approve it with no, I mean, are we approving it and then saying it can be as big as they want? I mean, I'm under a little bit questionable about the
Okay.
request.
It'd be appropriate for you to put a square footage in. I believe the applicant wanted to mirror what was there, or actually make it smaller.
That's gonna be smaller. Like I said, the total between all the signs will be 199 square foot. So the additional ones will be, the whole footprint will be 5.5 foot by 10 foot. So it's gonna be smaller than the existing sign that's out there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the variance, finding that the requirements of section 39.12.011C1 have been met by the applicant for the variance with the following condition, that the total sign square footage be limited to 200 or less square feet.
I'll second.
There's a second to the motion. Motion has been made to accept with the stipulation. Trevor, what do you vote?
Aye.
And Sean?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Thank you.
Motion carried. Thank you. Our next item here is to consider a variance request to exceed the maximum square footage of 1,200 square feet of an accessory structure for an R1 zoned lot to a total of 2,400 square feet. Per zoning district regulation, note number 7, Chapter 39, tables notes 4-3, located at 3285 110 X Avenue Southeast. Is there anyone here to speak for that? Come to the podium and...
Good morning. Tony Heffley with Heffley Construction. I am the contractor for the project. They asked me to speak on behalf of for this project. It's just a 40 by 60 building, 2,400 square foot that they want to set behind their house mainly for storage for camper and other vehicles of theirs.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board? Leonard, do you have any comments or anything on this?
For the board, just kind of a repeat of what you have in front of you. The lot, I think, definitely is just under an acre. The structure that they're proposing is set off per the plan at 22 feet from the property line. There are trees throughout the property. As you've worked on these in the past, the city believes that this would fit in the guidelines of what's been approved by the board before.
Okay.
I did receive a couple calls on the, and there was not a definite for or against.
Okay. Is there anyone out here that is not in favor of this? Okay. Any other questions from the board? If not, is there a motion to accept or to deny?
I'll move to approve the variance finding the requirements of section 39.12.11C1 have been met by the applicant for a variance.
Okay, thank you. There a second?
Second.
There is a second to accept the variance. Sean, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And I will vote aye. So, motion accepted.
Thank you.
And our number 6 item here is to consider a variance request to increase the required maximum front yard fence height of 4 feet to 6 feet on an R1 zoned lot located at Lot 4, Block 2, including the east portion of vacated 22nd Avenue West State Edition. Is there anyone here to, would you state your name and your...
Yeah, I'm Brett Halverson. I'm the owner of the property at 2164 7th Street, which is directly adjacent to the south of this lot. We ended up purchasing this lot after we built this house on 2164 7th Street as potentially a bigger backyard. And that's what we plan to use it for. We're going to be putting sod and sprinklers, and we wanted to fence it in for our kids, basically, for a secure place for them to play. The 6-foot fence that we're planning to put in is actually just a black aluminum wrought iron, non-privacy, so it's a see-through fence essentially. That's the main reason why we're asking to go with a 6-foot, is more for a security, a little more secure than a 4-foot fence that is easily, I guess, easier for people to get into. So it's more of a security thing than anything else, to go with the 6 foot. And we chose the aluminum wrought iron, nice looking fence over a privacy type fence because we thought it would be, it doesn't affect people's view through or around it, so they can still see through is what we're asking for.
Okay. Okay. Is there anyone here to speak against that?
I'm Dave Michelson. I live on A Street, directly facing south to this lot. I wasn't familiar, I guess, with the structure of the fence. Having the see-through would make a difference. The only thing I have to say is, talking to only one realtor who wished to remain anonymous, they said they did think that that might negatively affect the land values because we're looking at a 6-foot fence directly out our window. So that was one thing that we were concerned about as neighbors. And but that being, I guess, the lesser of two evils for us would be having a see-through fence or having it see-through. That might make it more aesthetically kind, and so I guess I'm still speaking out against it, but at the same time, that makes it more acceptable.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Andrew. I live directly across the street.
Put the phone down.
I live directly across the street from the lot in question. And I do have some concerns also. I understand the type of fence he's doing. I want to know what it is I'm going to look out my front window and I'm going to see a backyard. And is he going to put in a sidewalk? Is he going to put trees there so I don't have to look at all the playthings in the backyard? There's just questions that weren't addressed in the letter, so we would know what we're dealing with.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that we could put up 6-foot fences in front yards, basically what it is. So those are the questions I want to have answered to see what they are actually going to do with it.
Okay.
And I do agree that the aluminum fence is the way to go. I have it in my backyard, but I guess I want to just know what he's planning on doing.
Okay. Thank you. Are you able to explain further?
So actually, the sidewalk should be going in this week. I talked to it's going to be J&L doing the sidewalk. We're doing that for sure. I guess between the sidewalk and the street, we're planning to put in rock, and we might probably put a couple trees, just like most people do, in their front yard. We're going to be, it's going to be landscaped, obviously with sprinklers and grass, and it's going to look nice. We are going to put in some trees, so that way you don't have to look at the play stuff from the kids. But yeah, we're going to try to make it look nice. It's going to be a lot nicer than dirt and weeds, and so we definitely don't want to have a privacy fence. If we have to go that route, I guess we'll have to go with 4 foot, but we would like to do the 6 foot black aluminum. It's a very expensive fence, as you know. Yeah, we're just asking for that variance, just because we feel like it'll be more secure than a 4 foot fence. But yes, it will. We're putting a lot of money into making it look nice with trees, and we are putting the sidewalk in this week. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Leonard, do you have any comments about this?
There was additional call from the neighbor to the east concerned about backing out of the lot. The city at Dickinson has a vision triangle, and with this fence, it would, if approved, it would have to prove to meet that requirement. There would be risk if it's approved. You get your permit, it goes up. If the neighbor to the east has an issue or cannot see through it, I believe an adjustment to that fence would be required unless you angle it from the get-go and create that triangle. This is being used as a rear yard at this point in time, and it is a separate lot. If this lot does go up for sale, I guess in the motion I'd ask that how we enforce that, I'm not sure at this point. We'd have to flag it into our system that if you approve this, this is for this particular use. That if he sells a lot and a home goes on here, the fence would have to be removed. Because then it turns into that front yard. I don't, if you have some comments on that, if we don't do something like that, I could see a flood of 6-foot fences being requested in front yards.
When this gentleman applied for the permit, was there any stipulations you had to have a design or something to, we could look at?
Well, sorry, he actually did send me a text on the fence. If you're familiar with the neighboring lot, by driving by the neighboring lot, it appears to, it's pretty transparent to look through and see the backyard. One of the stipulations also was that he put in public sidewalk. He did know that from the start, that he would be putting the public sidewalk in.
I have a couple statements. I actually own property within the 300 feet of the proposed project, so I just wanted to disclose that so everyone knows that too. I have a couple questions for the city. There is another lot in this neighborhood that has a second lot as a backyard that's not fenced in. So I'm assuming that as far as using that as a backyard, that's not anything that we can concern or regulate with in this motion, right? This is just for the fence.
Correct. In our ordinance, if you have no plans on developing a lot, the city does have it in the code to actually put in public sidewalk, but that isn't something that we're pursuing at this time. The city of Dickinson has a sidewalk program where the city will come in and install that public sidewalk and assess the property. If you have zero future plans of developing or selling that lot for a residential house, and you put in the sod, the sprinkler systems, and a play, we would probably come in and ask that you put that public sidewalk in.
Okay. But as far as, I mean, since they're not combining the lot, they're also indicating to you that at some point they may build a house on it or
correct
do that. So,
and even if they combine the lot, they could split the lot in the future.
I gotcha. Okay. So mainly what we're concerned with is just the fence of 4 foot, 6 foot, and the
vision triangle
versus the white, and then the white triangle. Yeah, the state triangle. Okay.
Would you two folks like to look at these? Give you some idea of what that may look like as far as the fence.
This is a beautiful fence. So, like I said, and I'm all about sensitivity. I teach, so I'm sensitivity to security for his children, I think this looks really nice. I'm also a driver ed teacher, and I don't think there's a visibility problem for the neighbor to the east. So I feel much better after having looked at these pictures and at what he has described as what he's going to do. At the same time, you know, our concern is what we're looking at, and also, like I said, property values in the neighborhood. And I don't know if we can speculate how that would affect negatively or not. So I guess what I'm saying is I like what they put together, and I know he's put some money into it. And this is a nice area. The other lot that Trevor referred to obviously is beautiful as well, because they don't have it fenced, and they maintain the whole lot as if it's their backyard and do a great job. So I guess I'm a little bit more neutral now than when I walked in.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the lady back there?
My only problem was like what he mentioned too, was that the effect of property value
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I've got just a couple maybe. First, for the city, a 4-foot fence would be allowed currently, right?
Correct.
And so adding the 2-foot, and that could be a solid fence, you'd just be concerned about the neighbor's driveway and sight distance.
The neighbor's driveway, as close as is, the 4-foot fence actually goes down to 32 because it would be in that vision triangle.
So even if we approve this, I guess what I'm getting at is, even with this fence, that's still something that you guys will be looking at or working. We're not, if
Correct.
we were to approve it, we wouldn't be approving a variance to a safety concern, I guess, is
Correct.
the issue. It's still but they could still put a solid fence there. You'd still have to work through that, which would still negatively impact neighbors the same way potentially, or even worse, right? Because you can put a 4-foot in the front yard.
Correct.
Okay. Here it looks like you're gonna do vinyl for most of the lot on the side, and then kind of matching up the neighbor's house, and then gonna do the wrought iron to the front? Is it?
Wrought iron from the extension of the current fences, I guess, inside of them, basically. It's just going to close in the backyard.
Okay. And then if we did approve this and the use change, whether we approve this as a rear yard fence, if someone were to build a house that goes to a front yard, it's not an approval of that fence in a front yard at that point, is it? Or would it be?
Actually, that's what I'd ask for. We can flag properties. We'll actually, we call it flagging the property for no building permit, and then we'll have the reason in there. And this specific reason would be the fence. I'd ask that as part of the motion, if the board wants to approve this, is that this is being used as a rear yard.
Any other questions?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question, I have a comment. I guess I like the see-through fence a lot better than the vinyl fence. As far as, for property values concerns, I know we can't say that for sure, but since I also live within the thing.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept or to deny on the item number 6?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd move to approve the variance finding that the requirements of section 39-1211C1 have been met by the applicant for a variance with the following conditions. One being that it is continued to be used as a rear yard. Does that address the concern you had?
Yes.
And the second one would be that the fence be similar to the drawings, that elite wrought iron fence that was presented to us at the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually exactly like this one.
And you're okay with those conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
Justin, I think Premier Fencing is the one that's going to be doing the job, and he sent me these pictures, so.
Okay, thank you. There is a motion to accept. Do we have a second motion?
I'll second his motion.
Motion has been second. Okay. Sean?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well. So hopefully you can make that look nice. The folks behind you will accept that for you. Thank you. There being no one here to speak for item number 1 and 2, I would vote actually table this then till our next meeting. Leonard, can you give us a little background on that? I understand that the buildings were built and there was obviously the gentleman indicated to you that he did have permission to do that.
The property in question it has multiple buildings on there. According to city records, we don't have building permit records for those structures. There's been time in the past where the county had the property. I asked the applicant to submit that documentation. I haven't received anything to date. The structures have been there for many years. I have no question to question the structure themselves because they are standing and they've been there for many years. The property is actually what he's wanting to do is subdivide the property and create more lots. He did it for it's for family. He's done one lot already. There's a new structure on it, and he'd like to continue to do that for other family members. This variance is part of the plot, acceptance of the plot. Unfortunately, the applicant is not here today, and I believe this is may be a condition of that final plot.
Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe Mr. Schwinn is correct. I do know that the applicant is working through planning and the engineering department for the final plat, and there were some conditions as well as some development agreements and things like that that need to be executed. But I do believe that this is a condition, and it will be up to the three of you gentlemen to determine whether you would like to take action on this today. You can certainly do that without the applicant being here if you choose, but that's for you to decide how you want to proceed today.
All right. Thank you. What are the wishes of the board present here? That do we act on it today, or do we table it for further documentation? Any questions from the board? That's the only way that this got to this office or to this group, was by him going back and trying to rezone or replot that property, because I guess I couldn't understand. These buildings have been there for a long time, and why does it come to this board when they're there? They're standing there. I mean, I guess that's my question.
Okay, so when we do a review on when a lot comes, he has a parcel and he wants to split it up, we review that property as far as compliance with our code.
Okay.
And when he actually breaks down the square footage and acreage, you get X amount per acre of accessory structures. And the more he reduces what he has for his structures, the more out of compliance that he becomes.
Okay.
And we have to address that as a building department for issuance of a building permit or any future building permit.
Okay. So in other words, if he hadn't done this, this would not have been an issue.
Correct.
Okay. What are the wishes of the gentleman here? Are we,
So if we do nothing, do they just stay as non-conforming structure? And if something happens to them, you won't be allowed to bring them back? Is that, or does he need our approval to approve the plat?
It will need your approval in order to move forward with the plat, yes. If the structures went down today and he wanted to rebuild them, he would not get a building permit. He'd have to come in front of this board if he doesn't meet the criteria, which he wouldn't because he's over the square footage of accessory structures.
And was he over when they were built, or do we not know that? Is he creating that by, am I understanding you, by subdividing, he's creating that because he's taking
He's creating
acreage
more of
away?
an issue. It's an issue without it, I believe. He has a really large structure on there. There's 6 structures where our code says you can have 3 accessory structures to the primary. He has 6, so that was the other variance request.
Is there any concern of, since it's like, I know we lean more towards approving when it's an existing structure, it's already there. Do you have any concern about people taking larger properties, doing the buildings first and then trying to subdivide it? I know this has been there a long time, but I could see.
Absolutely. That's definitely thought of, yes.
do we want to move on this, gentlemen, or just let it ride?
What's the city's concerns? Does the city have any thoughts on this, or, I mean, I get the code, but
Well, the concern the city would have as far as documentation of the structures. If the applicant was able to supply us with the structure details, the city would definitely be more comfortable.
I guess I'm fine tabling this or leaving it if we wish, since they're not here to provide the documentation that.
I would be interested to know if he actually has something from the county or whatever, some type of agreement that he was able to do this. I guess at this point we have nothing.
I also kind of would like some information on kind of all the other structures. Are they all going to remain there? I know they requested for 6, but is it all? And then, you know, as far as putting a limit to no more accessory structures on there, et cetera.
Yeah. One thing as far as, again, the structures are there. They've been there for some time. Whether or not the board would look at this is asking the applicant to provide that documentation or supply a structural review of those by a design professional that they meet the code. Again, I don't believe the city's going to ask that these structures be removed. I don't believe that will happen.
Yeah.
So as far as moving forward with it, or we're just prolonging the outcome, that we actually ask the applicant to provide that documentation within a time frame.
So you're saying if we're concerned about that, we could approve it and say, if you have the documentation, bring it in.
Yes, or he hires, if he does not have any documentation, that he hire a structural professional to verify that these structures meet the intent of the code.
Okay. Your motion was to table this, Trevor?
I was just commenting on it. I was
Okay.
seeing what you guys' plan, our ideas are. I'm comfortable either way. If we want to vote on it, if we want to table it.
Any
Well,
questions?
I guess the only, if we table it, are we just putting it up? I mean, if we were to approve this and put a stipulation on there that provided that structural information is supplied to the city proving the buildings meet this intent of the design of the structure, does that take care of our concerns? Because if he comes and says, yeah, the county said it was okay, then, and we approve it, we still don't know, but we could approve this because they've been here for so long with the stipulation that it's only approved once he provides the documentation, correct?
Correct. I would ask that he provide that documentation as soon as possible.
Mr. Chairman, I get the intent behind the motion. My only thought would be, obviously, if he doesn't provide it, then he can't move forward with that. And then if that were the case, does that bring us right back here where we are because those structures are still existing and have been for quite some time? I don't know. Again, even if he were to provide something and we had concerns about it, or the city had concerns about it, what would the city require him to do? Add on to a structure, repair a structure? I mean, at that point, it seems as if the city is just asking for documentation to what's already there, and I don't know if he would even have it. That would be my only concern, is that we might just be asking for it, and if it didn't provide it or it was insufficient, what's the city's next step going to be? What remedial action would the city require, if any? I mean, it's hard to say because we don't know, but I'm just trying to see if we're kicking the can down the road here.
Generally, I'm going to use example after a storm. If we actually ask somebody to provide structural integrity of a building, if a design professional goes in and says this is what this building needs, he'd get a permit and make those repairs. Otherwise, that design professional would say, nope, it does meet the intent of the code. We're trying to accomplish something backwards again, and it seems like we're doing this maybe just too often, where if these things are happening, it's unfortunate, but we have to draw a line somewhere. And I believe we have one other one that's like this, where a structure was added onto, and they're asking for a variance request. If you look strictly at the building code, it should be removed, and actually fees applied for building without a permit. We're working with the applicants. That's our intent. That's the intent of the city of Dickinson, is to work with applicants. And people do make mistakes, and we're here to work with them to make sure that we have a safe built environment. That's what the city's stance is, that we have a safe built environment. The structures are standing. I don't believe the applicant would build or have built a substandard structure, but we don't have any documentation, which is a struggle for what I do.
I think that what I would like to see would be that we run into a situation like this at your office that comes to you. I think it's redundant that it comes back here to us. This is something that has happened, and I think the city should move forward and get whatever documentation they need to verify that the individual structure sitting there is adequate and meets your criteria, and leave it at that, because we're not going to tear it down, obviously. And it's just, as the attorney has indicated, that we're going in a circle here. And
if I may, if we remove ourselves, the city, that is from the Board of Adjustment, and we take a separate avenue asking him for that documentation on a separate note, if he doesn't provide them, then we go through the legal process to get that documentation. Would that be appropriate?
If we had to, yes. I mean, we could certainly ask for it. Obviously, the hope and intent would be to do it as cordially and amicably as possible. And he is going through other parts of, like I said, the platting process, so it's not unusual, I think, to ask for that information as part of this whole process, so it's not out of the ordinary.
I can see what possibly happened there. He purchased that property, and before the county and the city got together, put the buildings together, and no questions asked. And now, today is a different story. So I think we need to find a different approach to handle these situations. I think that, I know this isn't the only one that we're probably going to see, or not the first one we've seen, but to me it seems like it's redundant for us to even talk about it, because the building is there. And obviously, like I said, and this gentleman, I would agree with you that wouldn't have put something up just to have a building there. I'm sure it's adequate and probably would conform with what you're looking for. But I guess those are my feelings on this type of situation.
But I guess the reason we're talking about, if we don't approve this, then and technically you're going to have to go through the process to get them removed, correct? I mean, to make them into
Correct.
compliance. That's why it's here, and I guess my intent of my earlier discussion was, is there a way that we can say that we approve this as long as the documentation's there, so it doesn't come back? I don't want to, I'm throwing the burden back on you, saying we're okay with them having the 6 structures, we're okay with the square footage, provided those structures, that gives him some assurance that if he goes and spends the money to have a structural engineer come in and do that, that he's good to go, instead of spending the money and then we still don't approve it. You know, that was my intent. So our part's done, and now it comes back to you getting the documentation. Is there a way we can do that in a motion of our approvals to say you're okay with this as long as it meets the intent of the code, the city's intent, whatever?
I would agree with that statement, yes.
See, that's what I'm trying to say. So then he knows that then we're done, we're out, and then it's up to you to make sure you get the documentation. But planning and zoning, if he's still waiting on that condition, that's not approved until the documentation comes, right?
I believe so.
Right. My only question, Mr. Swinton, and maybe you can answer this, and Mr. Hadley isn't here, I assume as part of the subdivision plat process that the other lot sizes are not going to change. And if they had to come back and request additional structures on those individual lots, that would come back before you for a variance to increase the structure size. So we're just dealing with the structures that just currently exist on his property.
This is actually what ends up on, after the property is plotted, what his remaining square acreage is what this variance is for.
Okay. Then I think if the intent would be that to address Mr. Soren's motion, you would just make approval contingent upon the production of the information that you're requesting. And I would suggest that for purposes of the whole process, considering there's multiple moving parts, you might want to try to put a time limit on it, I suppose, that it be provided within, 30 days, and if not, a good reason or good cause to extend that time frame. Obviously, the purpose of that is not to delay him, but to put his feet to the fire, because he does have additional things in the works with the city with just the subdivision process anyway. That way, we're not, again, kicking the can down the road, waiting for documentation to get into the city.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Could we frame the motion as far as, because we're talking about non-specific documentation at this point of what the city requires. Can we say it something to like where the city approves the structures as the intent that they're for, something like that, where essentially we're approving it, but they got to work with the city to get those structures okayed. And the city can require what you want to require from them.
Okay.
That way we're not just talking about.
Yeah, I think you could say something as very specific but in vague as possible to say that you're contingent upon adequate documentation provided that meets the approval of the city building department. So there's some flexibility. That's not saying that we have to have building specs or we have to have a structural engineer, but something that Mr. Schwint can rely on so that he feels comfortable in making the assessment.
Yes.
Does that meet your intent?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor?
I would make that motion, but I don't know if I remember exactly the wording. But I will try. And that's going to be for, do we have to do one and two separate, or can we do them in one
Combine the two?
motion?
I would recommend, since they're on there as two separate items, that you do them separately.
Okay. Okay. Is there a motion to consider the variance request to exceed the maximum square footage of an accessory structure on an R1 zoned lot by 4,635 square feet located at 2400 State Avenue West?
I would move to approve the variance, finding that the requirements of section 39-1211C1 have been met by the applicant for a variance with the following condition: that adequate documentation, or contingent upon documentation being submitted to the city for approval of the structures, proper documentation. Help me with that wording. You had it really nice.
I would just say that that the applicant submit any necessary documentation to the city. I just had it. That meets the necessary approval by the city building department.
One addition to that is that there shall be no additional accessory structures, permitted or unpermitted.
That'd be number 2, but back onto yours, within 30 days, is that adequate time frame, or 60 days?
I believe that's generous, 30 days.
I mean, it's holding up
30
him if he doesn't do it,
I was
right?
hoping for 20 or less, but 30 days is fine.
Well, I mean, 20 is fine with me. We should put some time on it, I guess, as indicated through our discussion.
With the moving forward of the planning and zoning, I believe 20 would.
Okay.
The next meeting would be, I don't know if he intends to be on the next meeting, but that would be obviously July, third week in July. So that should be right around the time frame necessary and needed. So.
Okay.
And then the second one being no additional structures permitted.
Okay, so that's your first motion then?
That's the first motion with the 2 conditions.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Trevor. Sean?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And I will vote aye to the first. Okay, the second motion, or the second agenda item, is to consider variance request to exceed the maximum accessory structures on an R1 zoned lot of 3 structures to 6 structures located at 2400 South, or 2400 State Avenue West, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to accept or deny this?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance, finding that the requirements of section 39.12.011C1 have been met by the applicant for a variance with the following conditions. I believe it will be the same conditions as regular agenda item 1, to keep the wording the same. Can I just state it like that, that my conditions will be the same as that, so you keep the wording the same?
I think Haley will get it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll second.
I'll second. Trevor?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And I will vote aye on the second item. Motion carried. Is there any other comments about this type of situation? I know this isn't the last one we're going to see, but
I would say this one would be the extreme with existing structures.
okay.
With taking the county back on, obviously we're seeing things that may or may not meet the intent of the code, but we're working through that process as we move out into
Okay.
the areas.
Okay.
But again, our intent is to work with the citizens of Stark
Okay.
County, meet property compliance.
Okay, and I think you guys do a good job, but it's just, I think that some of this got kind of mixed up at the very beginning, and both city and county weren't probably together as well as they are now. And I think our intent on this board is to work together with the landowner. As we indicated, we wouldn't ask Mr. Kubas to tear his buildings down, but it's just a issue that I think we could nip in the bud and not have it come through this board. Would be great to see that. So there being no other business, or is there any other business other than that? I would ask for adjournment.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I put the tax